Good morning, everyone. My apologies for not having my robes on or even my rakasu today, but a lot of our things were temporarily misplaced this morning, and by the time we found my robes, it was already starting time. It felt too rushed to change. So we've talked a little bit before about the Lojong slogans, a collection of short instructions, kind of pointers that come through the Tibetan tradition. And I've just put together a collection just to say a few sentences on each of them around the discipline of mind training. And really what a lot of them are doing is they're just a little kind of like mindfulness bell to go, oh yeah, I do that a little bit, or I used to do that a little bit, or I see that happening, and so that then we can increase our capacity to be aware of our own thought patterns. And in this instance, a lot of them are, some of them are being aware of how things actually are, and some of them are about noticing the way in which we see things in a mistaken way. And so it just provides an opportunity for us to practice in a more subtle way, noticing our mental habits. So I just made a list here. There's lots of different translations of the Lojong slogans, and I've used the translations from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche in this little book, Training the Mind, on the slogans, and some of them I've just slightly reworded myself, just maybe for ease of access to them. So this section, the slogans are broken up into different sections. This section is called Disciplines of Mind Training. And one of them is to maintain our basic vows. And maybe our most basic vow is what we call the Bodhisattva vow, which is the vow to, we say, save all beings, but you can think of it as to save or to think respectfully about all beings with our minds. So we're thinking more or less all day, every day. We're often thinking about other people and just other events, other species. We're just thinking about, we're thinking about ourselves. And we've taken this vow to cultivate thinking in a way that has care and respect in it. So even if we're thinking a thought that is critical of another person, we can do it in a way that still has care and respect in it. It doesn't mean that we're trying to force our minds to only think very nice thoughts. It doesn't really mean that. It just means to always have some sense of care and compassion and intimacy and connectedness in our minds when we think about anybody, any things that have ever happened, any things that might happen. Just for me, it's often that sense of, if I had that life experience, I'd be the same. Just it's a real sense of connectedness with people. So that's maintaining our basic vow. And then we have all our particular vows that we take when we sow a rakasu, the 10 grave precepts, the 3 pure precepts, and the vows of refuge. So they're just slightly more specific ways of, in the end, actually saying this same thing. To just with our minds, just to notice always with our minds whether we're thinking in a stingy way or an alienated way. and to cultivate thinking in a more compassionate way, an intimate way. Another form of mind training is to recall our non-existence. So to recall that our sense of who we are is a construction. It's a physical construction of atoms and elements and culture and all of these things. It's a physical kind of conglomeration of things that appears as a discrete thing. So on a physical level, it's a non-existence as well. It's just a kind of temporary coming together of stuff. And mentally, it's a collection of thoughts and ideas about ourselves. So recalling our non-existence it's just a really helpful practice when we feel constricted, to just remember I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who I appear to be, and neither is anybody else. Recall our non-existence. Whenever we feel ourselves getting constricted, that's just a very useful type of mind training, just to remember, whatever words work for you. For me, I'm not who I think I am. But each of us can find our own words for recalling our non-existence. And this collection here, they're not in really any particular order. Some are more kind of all-encompassing and some are very specific. So the next one is refrain from outrageous action, which seems like a funny thing to suddenly have just there, refrain from outrageous action. And then I put in brackets, don't draw attention to yourself or to ourselves just for its own sake. So you can see how that actually flows on. It's a logical extension of recall our non-existence. It's just a very specific one. Don't engage in outrageous action for the sake of drawing attention to oneself. And maybe it's just a good caution not to engage in outrageous action, because not always, but maybe often, outrageous action is tricky and risky, and is more likely to result in harm. A little bit like anger is the same way. It's not never a good idea to get angry, but it's tricky karma. It's a high-risk activity. Anger is a high-risk behaviour to engage in, and angry thoughts are a high-risk activity to engage in. But there may be some moments when anger is the right thing, but it's high risk. So the same with outrageous extreme action. There's a few moments when extreme action is the right thing to do. Maybe to jump into a swimming pool to grab a child, and your phone gets destroyed in that process, but that was a good idea. So there's no doubt extreme action is sometimes a good idea, but outrageous or extreme action is probably generally not a good idea. And I think if we were to look closely at that and examine what's the motivation for outrageous behaviour, it's probably usually something to do with a strong sense of oneself and a strong sense of others and what you want others to think of you, some kind of dynamic like that. But not always. There'll be exceptions. So anyway, that's one of the slogans, refrain from outrageous action. I think the way that would most likely show up in my life is storytelling. Somebody tells a story about something that happened, and then I might have a story that's a little more extreme than that story, and I want to tell it. But sometimes good ideas, no need. Don't have to tell that story. Sometimes it might be good to tell that story, but I'm more likely these days to just refrain and go like, they've just told a great story. I don't need to tell an even greater one. I could just be quiet right now. Let them in, let everybody enjoy the story that just got told. I don't have to say, oh, this bear attacked my neighbour or something. I don't have to do that. Just leave it be. That might be a more likely type of outrageous action that some of us would be more likely to be tempted to engage in. So it's, just being steady, a little bit too like a teachings on the middle way, not too extreme, not too passive, not too active, just a steady but alive, steady but alert, sort of middle way of just being in the world. Another one of the slogans in this collection is develop patience. I appreciate patience more and more. It's a real sign of that we have trust in ourselves and trust in the circumstances, that we don't have to jump in and try and fix it straight away. We can just let something be as it's being for a period of time. Often, like a good example would be when someone has a complaint. Someone has a complaint and you're involved in the possible solution to that complaint. Sometimes it's good not to solve it straight away, just to hear the complaint, validate the complaint, and just wait and see for a little bit whether it solves itself. Kind of trusting that things can solve themselves without us having to be involved. Because sometimes I think the risk of jumping in too quickly is that we just make things worse. And of course, one of the vows that we take actually is, not to make things, not to do harm, which I can often think of too as, whatever you do, just don't make things worse. If possible, don't make things worse. If there's a conflict between two people and they come to one or both comes to you about that conflict, it's easy to make things worse. It's easy to give advice to that person and give advice to that person and make things worse. So I think a good starting point is just to be patient. Just to be patient. Validate, be patient. See whether just the natural flow of things. Everything's always changing, so just see if in the natural flow of things the conflict solves itself. It won't always. Sometimes action really is needed, but patience is a good thing to cultivate. Change our attitude from self-concern to other concern. That's another one of the slogans. Change our attitude from self-concern to other concern. Sometimes this is described as the actual this is the key to happiness. This is the key to peace of mind, is to shift from self-concern to other concern. Shift our focus from what I want for myself to how can I be of benefit to others, without neglecting our basic needs, of course. We have to still care for ourselves, but how can I shift in an overall way, my general focus, like how I conduct my life, from self-concern to just as an example, I was listening to someone the other day on an audio book talking about what they wanted to do with their life, and they just wanted to have as much fun as possible and travel around the world and just have as much fun as possible. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But I thought, I don't know. I think it would be maybe more satisfying in the end to have said, I think I led a meaningful life. I think I led a helpful life. and maybe had plenty of fun along the way, but the emphasis not being so much on the fun and the having personally fantastic experiences, but more helping others have good experiences and that becoming a good experience in itself. It feels like that might be a more deeply satisfying in the end. A more sort of, I always like to think about in terms, don't aim for happiness, aim for satisfaction, and sort of just a general sense of you being a decent person in the world. So sort of not having guilty thoughts kind of thing, having a life where you're not full of, you don't have regrets and guilt, and you've led a satisfying life. You don't aim for happiness directly. You aim for having a life that you can look at and go, that was well done. And then happiness is a byproduct. So that's just a subtle shifting from self-concern to other concern. I think a lot of people end up doing that. They might spend a certain half of their life trying to just have a good life for themselves, and then often people, as they get older, actually shift more, make that shift. Kind of a realisation occurs that caring for others is more satisfying, actually. Leads to a greater inner peace because there's less, you're just not even focusing on yourself as much, which is generally more satisfying. So shifting from self-concern to other concern. Parents obviously have to do that a great deal. And sometimes it's painful, making that shift for parents. This one, I like the wording. Don't talk about injured limbs. I think injured limbs is just a very visceral way of don't talk about others' faults. Don't talk about injured limbs. We all kind of know, obviously, that if someone's got a physical disability, you don't sort of point and talk about it in a disparaging way. We all kind of get that in these days. Maybe not at different times in history, but these days we get that. But we don't always get that it's not good to talk about someone who's got trouble with anger, or someone who is arrogant, or has a tendency to laziness, or all the various things all the injured limbs that people have. People have all sorts of injured limbs just because of all the things that have happened in their lives. Don't talk about injured limbs. And again, it's mostly in your head. We do most of our talking in our head. So don't talk in your head about other people's injured limbs. Such an easy thing to do, and I think easy to do it just even accidentally, not trying to do it just by default. Just finding ourselves thinking ill of somebody's actions, not being generous in our thinking towards why they might be doing what they're doing. And then similar but just a slightly different emphasis, the next one is don't ponder or dwell on others' motivations. I think this is a very good one to contemplate. We don't know what's motivating ourselves a lot of the time. Like, I look back on my life and think, what was I thinking? Like, why in the world was I doing that? Or how did I fail to do the thing I should have done back then at that time? I look back and it's just not completely baffling, but I look back and I realise I didn't understand my motivations for what I was doing. I thought I did, but I didn't. I look now and think, I was motivated by that kind of neurotic tendency. I couldn't see it at the time. That's what drove me to make that choice. But at the time I wouldn't have said that. At the time I would have thought, this is a good idea, this thing I'm doing. So if we have poor or limited insight into our own motivations, we definitely have got a very, very limited insight into other people's motivations. No matter how much we think we know, we just don't know. We just don't know what motivates other people. Which doesn't mean that we don't have some kind of temporary hypothesis so that we can function, but we're just really important to know that it's just provisional. We just don't know what drives other people. We have to come up with some sort of theory sometimes just so that we can function, but if we don't need to have a theory, good just not to have one, just don't expend energy on it. But if we do need to have one, try and have a respectful one and know that it's inaccurate. And it is interesting how often people are very confident that they know what motivates other people. And then work with your greatest weakness. I think this is very challenging. It's hard for us to even know what our weaknesses are. But whatever weaknesses we do know we have, or shortcomings or challenges, just to, work with them as best as we can. Work with them, whatever they are. Abandon hope of fruition. Just don't try to get anywhere. Abandon hope of fruition. I think I might think of it like abandon having too much hope of fruition. I think it's all right to have a bit of hope of some fruition, but just don't have too much hope of fruition, or don't make that the focus too much. Just the emphasis more being on the present experience rather than the fruition, the present experience of whatever we're doing rather than the outcome. But hopefully we're holding good outcomes that we're hoping for ourselves and for others, but not to get disappointed when it doesn't go the way we want, which is kind of quite common. I sent some photos to my son. I'm building a house for my son, as you probably all know. It's a lot of work. And I sent him some photos, and he called me up and went, "The window's in the wrong place." And it's a mud brick house. It's not like a timber house. You can move a window in a timber house. The window's in the wrong place. He's on the autism spectrum, so this could be a very big deal. It's not like, it's like, you have to move it across 2 feet. So I just relaxed and went, well, I totally trust that you and I will figure this out. I have no idea how to figure this out. I'm hoping he'll change his mind and decide that the window's okay where it is. But if he really isn't, I probably will actually, I looked it up last night, you can get these things called demolition saws. They're a saw that cuts through concrete. And I might end up cutting through the mud bricks, pulling them out, shifting the window down. I might end up doing that. Anyway, was that under abandoned hope of fruition? Instead of wanting, I kind of suspected, knowing him, he's going to see the photos and there's a good chance there'll be something that he'll get fixated on. And he can't help it, it's not his fault. So if I'd hoped that he was going to say, "Thank you, Mum, that is so good," I would have felt terribly disappointed. But he didn't. He called me 3 times in one day to talk about that window. Yeah, so abandon all hope of fruition. Abandon spiritual materialism. that's a particular caution for us as practitioners, not to get caught up in how well we're doing as practitioners in terms of our own practice, or how well our zazen's going, or whether we've sewn a rakusu or have robes or any of those things. Just not to get caught in a materialistic view of our own practice. I'll just go through the last few a little quickly now, but I want to mention them all. Don't be rigid. I like that a lot. Don't be rigid. Don't wait in ambush. I think that's instructive. Don't wait in ambush. Sometimes we have this clear idea that what we know other people are like, and we wait in ambush to say, they're going to do it. I know they're going to do it. They're going to turn up at this meeting and they're going to block everything. Or they're going to turn up and they're going to complain. So don't wait in ambush in our minds. Don't make things worse. I mentioned that earlier. Don't blame others. Don't try to be the fastest or the best. Don't act with a twist, which is like don't have ulterior motives. So don't try and, get sympathy without asking for sympathy. Don't try and get praise without just asking for it. Like, it's fine to just ask for it. Tell me I'm okay. But don't say something hoping they'll tell you you're okay. And then just remember impermanence. Remember everything's just moving, changing constantly, which is a good thing. It's what makes life possible. If it didn't move, it wouldn't live. So. Right. Comments or thoughts on that? What's any of those? Let's see, without my glasses on. I have to put my glasses on. It was interesting last week, Bill, being on Zoom and seeing it, experiencing it from the other side. And it was really good. The only thing I noticed is every time we move the laptop, it made a lot of noise for people on Zoom. Okay. But otherwise, the microphone and everything. Oh, didn't use the microphone. It worked really well without the microphone.
I don't know if anyone else has raised their hand, but if not, I have just a little comment.
Yes,
this is Russ online.
Yes, Russ.
At Santa Cruz Zen Center in California in the United States, we are also studying the Lojong slogans, but Norman Fisher's Zen interpretation of them.
Yes.
And I have long been lusting for a copy of Chogyam Trungpa's version so I could compare the two translations. And I hope that one day you might have such a beneficial opportunity, and I bet that you will. And when you do, I hope that you lecture on the comparisons between the two.
Thanks, Russ. Yes, I've got that book, and we've talked about that book here, Training in Compassion by Norman Fisher. Yeah, right. It's good to compare them. There's a lot of similarities, a great deal of commonality. Some of it's just a period of time. This was written, I'm not sure, 70s or something.
Well, plus Chogyam was a much more kind of flamboyant guy, somewhat reputed to be subject to outrageous actions, whereas Norman is much more kind of moderate, middle path kind of fellow. Yeah, so that those two personality differences might have some expression in their interpretations.
They absolutely do. And so this was written in 1981 or published in 1981. It's one of the reasons I didn't actually read out of here from Chogyam's comments, because he does say outrageous things. Sometimes it just might not quite land the best right now.
Falls foul of the first one.
But I still, I have great, he was an extraordinary person and a great teacher.
Where was he?
Pardon?
Where did he teach?
He's Tibetan.
Yeah.
He fled from Tibet during the Chinese first occupation in the 60s. And then he was in the United States and he established a huge community in the United States. But he was, often people think of him as a crazy wisdom teacher. Very interesting character.
And there's a movie by that name, in case you want to learn more about him and his influence in the United States and many Western countries, actually, called Crazy Wisdom.
Yeah, it's a great film. I would recommend it. About his life, Crazy Wisdom.
On YouTube,
I think you can find it. I saw it actually in a picture theatre, but I think you can find it. I'm pretty sure it's findable. Yeah, Crazy Wisdom. Thanks, Russ.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
One of them was something about, it wasn't these words, but it was something like, don't engage in one-upmanship, don't try and...
Yes. No, I know the one you were talking about.
It's a bit just after outrageous, I think. What about outrageous? Don't talk about this.
They're funny. I know what you're saying, though. Yeah, have a look. See if you can work out which one it was.
Oh, I think that was it. You said don't draw attention to yourself. And stuff
right.
Like that. And
yeah.
You gave the example of someone telling a story. And,
oh, yeah.
Because I still remember when I was 5 years old in kindergarten, I can still see the vision in my mind of me sitting on the floor as little kids do, and it was show and tell time. And one kid stood up and he said that his grandmother was an astronaut and he spent the moon. And the kindergarten teacher said, I don't think that's true. I remember sitting here as a 5-year-old boy going, maybe his grandmother did go in the
and did you try to better that?
No, I did.
It'd be super hard to better that one.
The other, you mentioned there also about be aware of the non-existence of self from that. Yeah, that must be one of the hardest things to get your head around and to absorb, I don't know, to embody it. Like I was talking to a friend of mine who's done some mindfulness, and the way he talks about things, even though he hasn't been to Buddhist lectures, is quite Buddhist. And I said to him, okay, how about I ask you about a Buddhist thing, and I said about the 3 marks of existence, that all things are impermanent, they fade away and they change. That's it. Yep, cool. Yep, right. All things are unsatisfactory, and that you get joy out of ice cream, and there's too much ice cream, or playing golf all day, and all those things. He goes, yes. And then I said that, like, you exist, but you also don't exist. There isn't any part of you that you can point to that's essentially you. That in your case, your name's Cody, that is essentially Cody. And I've got to give him the credit. He looked at me and he just said, I don't know about that one. He said, yeah, the idea of self, and it's hard to, I suppose, especially because you do exist in the way, in the normal sense, but in the absolute sense, you don't exist.
Yeah. There's I've heard some teachers say that this is one of the hardest and most essential insights to acquire for practice. If you don't deeply get in the fibers of your body that you don't actually exist, there aren't really fibers in your body. If you don't fully get that, none of the other practice will sink it can only go so far. But that probably...
Oh, no, that's really tragic news.
Just the fact that you can joke about that, Russ, shows you're not overly attached to yourself.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah. But it probably applies to anything too, like any of the core teachings. If you really got impermanence, if you didn't really get impermanence, then the other teachings wouldn't be able to be properly understood. I mean, it probably applies to all of them. But I think emotionally, our non-existence is very hard. I think that's emotionally, we have such a strong habit. But it is definitely liberating to loosen that attachment. Like with that example with my son in the window, I could have just gone like, I've put in all this work, could have in my head gone there like, what? How could you, as a separate existing person, be so ungrateful for everything I'm doing? But if you just go like, oh, isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you said at one point like you find your own wording for these things. Because often that in no self thing is presented in a way of like, oh, if you think about it, you're breathing in at every moment, and so like there's carbon atoms going in. Oh, sorry, there's oxygen atoms going in, and there's carbon atoms coming out. And so over the course of a few days, all the atoms in your body will exchange, and so you don't really exist. Which is, true, but to me, it seems like an intellectual understanding of it. And I wouldn't say I found one yet, but I do think with some of the other teachings, it's just every now and again you find one version that sticks for you, that comes to mind often works. Yeah.
So is there one way of this idea of no self that works for you?
No, I don't feel like there's a version of no self that I can think of off the top of my head that regularly springs to mind.
Yeah. It will at some point.
Yeah.
For me, I'm made of non-self elements, which might sound clunky, but actually it just really works for me. I'm made of everything other than myself. I find that extremely helpful because I can follow the truth of that. I'm made of things that are other than myself. Neti can't make herself. She's made of everything other than herself. Just that works for me as a way of thinking about it. Yes, Anita.
One thing that I thought of as you and Bill were speaking is that I think I'm overlooking the, I don't know if you call it knowledge or whatever, the insight that to have that understanding of that we do exist is actually, it requires a valid mind to have that understanding. So we're doing the right thing by acknowledging and understanding that we do exist, but also having that deeper understanding that we don't exist. It requires you to understand that you do exist first. Otherwise, then, you'd probably be in an institute. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to have this conversation in the first place.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. And this is one of the reasons why when people want to come on retreat, you check that they're actually kind of grounded in just conventional reality enough first, because before you can really examine that conventional reality is not what it seems, you have to have some decent hold on conventional reality first. That's right. Or another way of looking at it is you need to actually kind of care about yourself and care about the world, have some kind of at least degree of self-love before you can begin to say, maybe I don't really exist. But if you don't have that basic self-love, some degree of self-liking first, then all that would happen is you'd be in an aversive type of way trying to dismantle yourself, and that actually would be terrible. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up.
I did think that there is a little mindfulness bell that comes for me sometimes, which is like you're privileging one scale. Sometimes that occurs to me. Like the way it gets taught sometimes is like, oh, you know, if you think about it, the atoms are always changing over. That's just saying if you were looking at the world at this scale, the fact of you just wouldn't make any sense. Likewise, there's a bigger scale, which is like, well, you're just, you know, part of your family or your society, etc. The reason that these things are happening to you are because of all these other causes and conditions that aren't you. Yeah. So that's one that does occasionally click.
Yeah. I think of that something similar in terms of species. Like we can see things through the lens of a human, and a bat sees things through the lens of a bat, an ant through the lens of an ant, and they're all valid, and yet we can't comprehend any of those different perspectives, and yet they're all valid. So then we can't possibly understand what this is. That's a little similar way of helping to dismantle a sense of knowing specifically something about something.
So when we start to dismantle me, and it's an endless process that you realize this is just all when you try to put it all back together. Well, I suppose you can, because here it is, but it's it's everything from a conversation you might have had that day right through to sort of life-changing experiences. This all has an influence on this, and you can start to tease it out and pick it apart and realize there isn't this. I'm thinking more not from Bill's example, from the chemical point of view, we can see it, but also from a mental, intellectual point of view, we can see that we're just this conglomeration. The more you think about it, I think the easier it does become. Yeah.
All right, well, we've got a Zazen Kai tomorrow, which is kind of exciting new development. We have had a Zazen Kai before, but it was quite a few years ago when we were first up in Fraser. But we're going to be sitting together in Mikalago tomorrow. And hopefully that will become a regular thing, so that'll be good. Thanks, everyone. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.